Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm doing another editing explained video for my book Arabian Dawn, the fifth book in the Trevor Knight series. I am on the fourth draft edits of the book, which is the first time I am going through the book editing it. So this is the first edit of the book. And so I'm going through the book with the red pen, making changes to it and explaining the changes I am making and why I'm making these changes. So for this video, I'm going to be going through acts 2, 3, and 4 of the book, the whole rest of the book. I've already done act 1, which I'll post up here. So anyway, we'll be getting into that in just a moment. But first I want to touch on a new book I got. I don't want to save this for like a book haul video because I'm just slowing down on my book buying. So it's David Almond, Skellig. Do not know anything about it whatsoever. It is a book on the top 1000 list by James Mustach. Anyway, let's get into it. The continued edits of Arabian Dawn. Okay, part 2. Kedar's arrows fly, but their pomp dies in Dedan. So I think Kedar was the biblical name of Saudi Arabia, the main country in this book, and Dedan is the biblical name of Yemen, who features in this act. And so what's basically going to happen is a war over Yemen, and so like the arrows fly is kind of metaphorical for war, and their pomp dies in Dedan, which kind of symbolizes, you know, this war is not going to go so well. So basically, Saudi Arabia is going to struggle in a conflict against Yemen. I like it. I like these kind of poetic act titles. If anyone's wondering why I do this, like biblical references for each act, I don't know. It's just something I decided when I started the series, just something to make it different. Okay, the main thing I want to show here is Knight looked to the wall but found the Da Vinci painting gone. I didn't really like that wording, found the Da Vinci painting gone, because I mean, how do you find something that's gone, you know? How do you find something gone? So instead, but the Da Vinci painting wasn't there. I just didn't like that wording, found the painting gone. Kind of weird. And I also got rid of an ellipsis there. I'm sure he just moved it. The wording in that next paragraph down, this other guy, crown prince and not him, I thought and not him was unnecessary. The sentence works perfectly while cutting it. I thought this part here is kind of some repetition. The character is kind of saying the same thing twice on like 2 different pages. So I just wanted to take this vital part here in the middle that I wanted to keep and just move that over to the other line. And the other lines there you see on the top at the bottom, they're just kind of unnecessary, so I got rid of them. For 2 reasons. One is repetition and the other is pacing. I just want to shorten it up a bit. And you can see here, this is the page where I will add that other line from the previous page. So just getting rid of stuff, make it more concise. I won't go through it, but this just shows you some random changes I'm making to the book. I won't go through it because most of these I've already gone over with you guys in different videos. Real kind of small changes. Here's another cliche. Knight felt himself running into a wall. I just don't like it because also just like the metaphor or whatever, himself running into a wall, it just doesn't like make any sense there. You know, I could see something like that being used, like if a character is actually like running or whatever, and then they, you know, just tire out, and then this cliche could kind of make sense. You know, they felt like they were running into a wall. But in this case, it just doesn't make sense at all. So I changed it to Knight felt his vocabulary strained. I may still edit that more because I don't really like that Knight felt part. And this is the whole point of editing. It's just each draft, you know, try to find a little bit better to write each sentence if I can. Again, won't go through it, but just small random changes I'm making to the book. The main thing I want to show you here, kind of like middle way through, I won't go through it, but I kind of have 2 or 3 characters here, and so I'm kind of switching around between like naming the different characters and also saying like he, because I kind of try to avoid using names if I can and just using like he or she, but they're both 2 guys in this scene, so it's kind of a little tricky to figure out how to say he and make sure readers know who I'm talking about. So I kind of just wanted to clean this part up here, so I won't go through it, but that's what I'm trying to do here. Make it so I have to use as few names as I can and also as few like he's as I can. And I do that just by switching the sentences around a little bit, and that hopefully makes it read better and flow better. Again, just small changes. You could pause and look if you want. The main thing I want to point out is I think this wording here was passive. Who started to lead him away? I just thought it's passive, so who led him away? Or just reduces some words. Really just reducing words all around, make it more concise. Again, not going to go through it, just small random changes. See now though that I have two uses of gaze. His gaze swept a row of boxes. His gaze returned to Mora. So I'll probably clean that up or try to in the next draft. This wording here, a 6th century pre-Islamic poet, you could see I wrote in here, is that terminology correct or offensive? Does Islam only begin with Muhammad? So yeah, that's just a note for myself because, you know, I'm not really too worried about political correctness. In fact, you know, I kind of like offending people if I can. But I also want to be selective about how I offend people. So like, just this wording here, you know, what is the proper way to call like, you know, pre-Islamic or like pre-Muhammad, you know, Islamic, you know, Arabic, whatever. So even though I will like deliberately and willfully have offensive bits or whatever, I just want to try to make sure my wording is actually correct here. And yeah. So is saying like pre-Islamic okay, or should I say pre-Mohammedan or whatever? I don't know. So I just really wanted to make sure I use a better wording here if this is wrong. Later on in this chapter, Trevor will say something about Neapolitan ice cream, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. So I thought it'd be kind of cool here just to insert like a mention of ice cream earlier in the chapter. So that is why Trevor mentions Neapolitan ice cream later in the chapter, is because right here early in the chapter you see Mora is actually eating a bowl of ice cream. So that's kind of why he mentions ice cream later on in the chapter. Super small detail, but it's just something I kind of wanted to insert into it. I really like this part here, the end of the chapter. Basically, Trevor and the Saudi prince Asajala are playing Call of Duty. And so I just kind of thought, well, what Call of Duty would they actually be playing at this time? And like, which map would they be playing, like online multiplayer map? So I found out like which Call of Duty was the most recent release at the time this book is set. So like which Call of Duty they would probably be playing. And I found out there was a map in that book, an online map that is based in Yemen. And this was perfect because just in like a few chapters, Asajala, the Saudi prince, is going to basically declare war on Yemen. So right here, Trevor and the prince are playing a video game based in Yemen, and it's absolutely based on like the actual Call of Duty game that was out at that time. But it's kind of foreshadowing in a way that, you know, the prince is going to actually launch a real war in Yemen in just the coming days. So I just really like that foreshadowing here, and also how it fits that this was the actual Call of Duty game that was out at the time. So just a real nice detail that just happened to line up perfectly. The main thing I want to point out here is sort of upper part of the page. The carved wood ceilings were being touched up. I decided to get rid of that because of the word were. Were is kind of indicative of passive sentences to me. The carved wood ceilings were being touched up. So I changed it to something like workers were, even though I have were there. I think it's like less passive in this case. Workers were doing touch-up paint jobs to the intricately carved wood ceilings. Again, I may like figure out a way to get rid of the were even from that revision. Again, small changes, not going to go through them all. Right here, I won't go through it, but I just didn't really like, I guess, like the point of view of this part. I mean, I introduced this Saudi general here, and something else is going on elsewhere in the country that's, you know, like hundreds of miles away. And so I was just kind of struggling with like the timing of everything. So like, how do I show like what is presently happening with like Yemen is launching some missiles at Saudi Arabia? So how do I like really cover that, but without like leaving the point of view of this Saudi general? So just trying to make sure the point of view stays closer to him while at the same time trying to say what is going on. So I won't go through it here, and I don't know if it's actually good or not. but you know, I just wanted to make it more closer point of view, basically. In this scene here, Asadullah, the Saudi prince, there's an assassination attempt against him where this woman tries to stab him with a knife. And at one time I read something, I think about a British prince who was attacked at one point, I think by a woman, and like he told the crowd like, it's okay, I'm unhurt, you know, this woman is mentally ill, don't hurt her or whatever. And so I just kind of really liked that like characterization or whatever, that in the aftermath of this assassination attempt, the prince is like real kind of generous, you know, he's merciful. You know, it's just a crazy woman with a dull knife basically tries to kill him. And instead of like, you know, having his guards kill her, you know, he's like, that woman is probably like mentally ill, so you know, do not treat her like, you know, a regular assassin. She has some kind of mental health issue here. So that's what Asadullah does here. And Asadullah here is based on like, you know, the real crown prince in Saudi Arabia. And I think something like this happened. A woman tried to stab him in Riyadh with a knife. And so I kind of decided to use that historical incident I read about I think a British prince who was attacked by a woman with a knife, and how he was, you know, merciful to her and saying like, hey, she has a mental health issue, be gentle with her. And so that's what Asadullah does here, is he tells his guards, be gentle with the woman, get her medical health treatment, you know, get her mental health treatment. And I like that for characterization. It just kind of shows you what kind of a guy Asadullah is. And also when he gets in his car, you know, his guards to take him away, his guard asks like, what do you want us to do with a woman? You know, now that they're kind of in private, you know, he says like, what should we do with her? And the prince replies, you know, exactly what I said, get her mental health treatment. And I just really like that, you know, that sometimes like once you're in private, then he'll say like, you know, have her tortured or something. But no, he keeps to his word, you know, he said she was a mentally ill woman and get her treatment, get her help. And so I just really like that characterization. Again, won't go through it all, just you can see some changes I'm making to the book. This change here, not this change precisely, but I mean, I make several changes in this chapter, and it probably took me like an hour of like research and stuff. Basically right here, I have this group of Iranian assassins who are arriving in Saudi Arabia. And so originally, like I have this, you know, customs official like stamping people's passports, but I kind of wondered like, do they even do that anymore? Do they even stamp passports anymore? So I looked it up, like Saudi Arabia's rules on passports and what they were when this book is set, what the rules were when this book is set. And so I basically kind of decided that they don't even have passport stamps anymore. So it says like, you know, he approved the man's visa and all that. Basically, I have like 3 different characters who are cleared into the country. So I like had to research like how each person would get into the country. Would they have a visa, or would they have an e-visa? Like, do you have to have it like printed beforehand? Do you have to have it approved beforehand? Could you just show up at the airport and do it? Do you like need a passport or whatever? And based on which country you are coming from and why, you know, it's different rules. So I just made the change throughout the chapter where each character here, you know, the rules are basically correct. So this Japanese man, since he is coming to work, he just has to present a visa, a work visa. So anyway, just trying to make it more realistic, I guess. And here you could see more of the changes I'm making. So up there you could see Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Kuwait and whatever. I mentioned all the countries. They can enter Saudi Arabia freely. They don't have to present any kind of passport or anything. They just need to show their national ID card. So that's all the characters do here. So I just like that little detail. For this little scene here, I wrote this little part about, you know, here's this battleship that is controlled by the British Royal Navy. So originally, you know, when I started the series, I wanted to have this British captain who is captain of a battleship. And battleships kind of went obsolete at the end of World War II. But I wanted to have a British captain with a battleship. And he kind of becomes like this world famous captain, you know? He has all these victories and stuff. And so he is kind of like bringing back battleships. So originally, you know, when I wrote this, I really kind of envisioned it like sort of like World War II, like just these capital ships duking it out. But, you know, as I was working on the series, I kind of realized that it wouldn't play out that way. Modern like sea battles do not occur like with ships just like trading shots at each other like that. Modern battles occur beyond visual range, so you don't even see the other ship you're firing at. You fire at them from, you know, 100 miles away or whatever. So I kind of am wanting to change it a little bit, where I do admit more that, you know, even though this is a battleship, it's not like the World War II battleships where they have all these like massive guns and all that. Their main arsenal would be missiles, because missiles are more efficient. You could fire them from 100 or hundreds of miles away, whereas with just like, you know, shells, like with the big guns, those can only fire like maybe 20 miles. So modern battles are going to be from, you know, 100 miles away, 150 miles away. So you're going to use missiles for that. So I kind of wanted to add this part here where I say this battleship is more armed. Its main arsenal is missiles, but still, it's a battleship. This one part here, I have something where there's this like saboteur or whatever, this like spy or whatever on this ship. And I have a line here somewhere where it says like this spy's motivation was not like involving a woman, but then like just in a few sentences or whatever, I do say that it's a woman involved. So I don't know exactly what I was thinking, like if I just changed my mind when I was writing or what, but basically, you know, what I had there saying like, you know, he wasn't doing any of this because of a woman. Well, yes, he was. So I just had to get rid of that line. For this scene here, I have this little dialogue here. Captain Barrett, I sink you another day, yeah. This is a captain from Egyptian Demise, where this Egyptian captain gets in a naval battle with this British captain, William Barrett. And so right here I have this line where they're kind of like jabbing each other back and forth, teasing each other in a way. Sort of like, hey, we'll have another fight another day. Right now they're friends. But I decided that little scene there, that little exchange of dialogue would be better to go at the end of this scene, because basically there's this other ship that is in need of a tow. And so that is more the pressing issue. That is like the business at hand. So I thought it made more sense if they did that first. If they did business first, like, hey, we need to make sure the ship is okay. And then once that's done, then these two can kind of trade shots back and forth, hey, we'll fight another day, you and me. So I just thought that'd go better after the little scene where they do like business first. For this scene here, again, I won't go through it in depth, but Trevor was just basically in a fight, and so he has to get cleaned up and everything. And originally what I had, like, he changes his shirt and all that, and Mora, this other character who's kind of like his love interest in the book, like she is right there when he takes off his shirt, and he has like blood in his nose and he's like clearing it out of his nose and all that. And I just thought it was just kind of weird, like why would he be doing all that in front of her? So I kind of wanted to get rid of it, and so yeah, so that's what I'm doing here. I won't go through it all, but that's basically what's happening, just because I didn't really think it's necessary. Like, why does he take his shirt off in front of her? I mean, yeah, maybe he's not super shy or whatever around her, but there's just no real reason for him to do that. I mean, he could just go in the bathroom and do it on his own just 20 seconds later. So I just wanted to make that change. It felt awkward to me. Again, I definitely can't go through this, but you can see what are supposed to be letters there on the left. There's like A, B, C, D, and even an E. So for this little scene here, I wanted to mix up these lines here. So originally what I did is I wrote those letters there to try to let me know which one I want to come first, second, third, fourth. And then you could say I drew an arrow there because I wanted to move all those lines down to another part. So not only am I shuffling all those lines around, I'm also moving them to the end of this other paragraph. And in this other image here, I actually like kind of made it clear, in case I completely confuse myself, which lines I want those to be ordered in. So like, take my job. So like, that line comes first. So you're not concerned. That line comes second. So you resent me or whatever. That line comes next. Then it says no, resent, no, but I don't, whatever. So I just kind of let myself know exactly in which order I want those lines. And so I kind of had prompts there. So I let myself know which lines come first. Because, you know, when I get time to make these changes into the computer, I probably will not remember which order I wanted all these words in. So this way I'll hopefully know. Oh my goodness, look at all this. Basically what I have right here is Trevor is talking to the Saudi Prince Asajala about like women's rights in Saudi Arabia. And kind of throughout the book, Trevor is really kind of pro-women. Like he's really trying to push this prince to expand like women's rights in the country and all that. But I didn't really want to just have this impression that Trevor is just like being a total simp for women or whatever, because I don't know, it just felt like it may be heavy-handed in a way. Like he's just really going overboard, just being like real pro women. And I don't know, I thought part of it may feel artificial in a way. So I actually wanted to add this line here in the left where basically he's talking about like, you know, giving women more power and stuff and how men are kind of complete idiots. And so I liked that, but I didn't want to make it sound like Trevor is just really being patronizing or whatever, just being real artificially pro-women. So I decided to add this line here in the left where, you know, it's just these two characters alone in the room together. And so here on the left, I added this line where Trevor pretty much says, you know, women are crazy. And like he has this line where he says something like, you know, if you break something that belongs to a woman, like a cup or whatever, or if you offend her in any way, you know, they'll bear grudges for their whole life and they'll want to like destroy you for the rest of their lives. They're just real vengeful people and evil, you know. I kind of wanted to have that to balance it out. So for the whole book, really, Trevor is pushing him to expand women's rights and all that, and, you know, trying to uphold, you know, women, the case for women. But I wanted to balance it out more. So here in private, you know, he does tell the prince, like, you know, hey, women are crazy too, you know, they're evil. So yeah, just balancing it out. And some people may not like it because they may think like, oh, you know, here in private, we see his real views, you know, he's misogynistic. You know, they may think that, but I don't know. I think this is just kind of, you know, they're alone, they're in private. So he does kind of say this just to kind of also let the prince know that he's not just being super pro women, you know, women, there is issues with women, or there are issues or whatever. So I don't know, just balancing it out a bit more. Part 3, Beauty Queen laid bare in her bloody lofty shrine. For this chapter here, I say move before chapter 43, so this would actually be before Act 3. And I kind of thought this chapter should be moved because basically the next chapter, the chapter I would have initially led this act with, that scene would have taken place probably like maybe 2 hours after this previous incident. But this chapter here, it should only take place like, you know, 40 minutes after that, like this big previous incident. Basically, there's this assassination attempt against this prince. So originally I had this scene come first and then, no, I had a scene with the prince come first and then I had this scene. But I thought it didn't make sense because this scene should take place like 40 minutes later and the scene with the prince should take place like 2 hours later. So it makes more sense that this scene would go before the scene with the prince because it just happens sooner, or it should happen sooner. So I think it makes more sense to have this go before the act break, because it should go before the scene with the prince. I'm not going to go through it here. Just this line, a large purple dot blotted his chest from taking a bullet, but blah, blah, blah. I thought that line was just kind of clunky, so I decided to add the line there on the right. So just to make it a little bit better, hopefully. So instead of a large purple blot dotted his chest from taking a bullet, blah, 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 it says a large purple blot dotted his chest, a nasty souvenir from the prince's security. And then it goes on from there. I don't know, I just thought it was better written. For this part here, Trevor has this line where he says like option A, we ride camels for an hour, blah, blah, blah. Then he says like, oh, actually that's kind of supposed to be option B, but you know, whatever. I don't really know what I was doing there. So I guess I was just trying to show he's kind of being awkward or whatever, but it was just kind of confusing awkward. It wasn't like endearing awkward. So I just changed this stuff around and cut some stuff up and move it around. So just trying to make it read better. Here in this scene, they ride camels through the desert to the Red Sea. And so when they get there, I have this line where Trevor looks across the sea and he sees hills. So basically he looks across the sea and he sees Egypt. I think I did look on like Google Maps to see like where you can see Egypt from Saudi Arabia. I think like whatever. But I took another look on Google Maps or whatever, and I think it is just too far. So, especially from where they are, I think you would not be able to see Egypt. So, I decided to get rid of that whole part where he looks across the Red Sea and he sees Egypt. No, he does not. He just sees the Red Sea. Egypt is too far away. This whole line here I decided to cut because later in the book you'll see this same line because this guy is basically recording this little speech into a camera, and later on in the book a character will get that tape and listen to his speech or whatever. So originally I was going to have it, both parts, you see the speech here and then you see it again later, but I thought it's just real unnecessary because I mean if it's the exact same speech, I imagine most readers would probably just skim it the second time around. So I decided to just cut it here the first time you hear the speech because you don't need to know exactly what he says here. You'll hear or read or whatever what he says later on in the book. So it was just kind of unnecessary to have this speech occur twice in the book. Right here, I won't go through it, but Trevor is kind of thinking about the Saudi prince, Asajala, because after like an assassination attempt against him, Trevor and Asajala do not meet for pretty much most of this act. So they are apart for a while, but I kind of wanted to insert these lines here. Talking more about how Trevor misses Asajala kind of and how he's kind of growing to like this guy. Just because since the two haven't met for a while, since readers won't get to see these two characters together for a while, Asajala and Trevor, I kind of wanted to add this to just have more substance there for readers, to let them know, like, to remind them about this relationship between Trevor and the prince, and to basically remind readers that, these two are going to get back together, and they are, Trevor is missing him, and just to kind of show more, I don't know, so the prince is not just out of the story for too long, to let readers know, to remind them of the importance of this relationship between Trevor and Asajala. I decided to add this part here because there's this little scene where Trevor and Mora go diving, and there's a scene where they see a shark in the reef, and this white tip reef shark, they live in reefs, and so I kind of described some about that species of shark and how they are, but I kind of wanted to add this line here basically where it says about how these sharks are verging on being endangered because of humans basically. And kind of the reason I do that is because I don't know how to say it exactly, but I don't really want to romanticize interacting with animals in the wild, where I don't really want to make it so readers may read this and think oh, I like these sharks, I want to go check out these sharks, and maybe hey, maybe I'll kill one of these sharks just for fun because I can. I just kind of wanted to add this line here where it's talking about how humans are pushing these species of sharks closer toward extinction. So just to kind of show readers that even though I don't know how to say it, just the nature or the beauty of nature in a way, just to show that these sharks exist in this wonderful environment or whatever, this habitat they have. I don't really want to attract people to that habitat because if you attract people to that habitat, well, you'll also attract poachers and stuff. So I kind of wanted to do more just to kind of let readers know that there is this issue where these sharks are verging closer toward extinction. I don't know, just to kind of use this moment while I can to kind of bring awareness, I guess, to these sharks and, what humans are doing to the sharks, pushing them closer to extinction. It's not really a good thing. So I just kind of wanted to add that here. Real small thing, I realized this was just a mistake. Mona Kari, whatever her name is, was at work when she received whatever. I kind of realized this character works at home most of the time. I don't know if she works at home all the time, but the only time you really see her working, she is at home. So I thought it made more sense here, instead of saying at work, to just say working. Sort of middle paragraph lower down, and it's rabble rousing, not rebel rousing. In like the paragraph above it, you see there's the line, perhaps your rebel rousing roommate would whatever. When I read that, I was kind of like, is that the correct wording there? Rebel rousing, or is it rabble rousing? So I looked it up and I found out, it is rabble rousing. So instead of like just changing it to rabble rousing, I decided it'd be funny there to just actually insert the line where this other character says it's rabble rousing, not rebel rousing. Real small change, but here Asajala is saying like, the Houthis, whatever, what if they were launching missiles in New York or Boston? I clearly show that Asajala is not super familiar with the United States, so he has some understanding of it. So I kind of wanted to get rid of that wording or Boston, just to kind of, I don't know, it's super subtle, but does the prince even know about Boston? Like, does he know that's a city? Does he know that's a major city? I kind of think that Sajala, he would know New York for sure, but would he know Boston? I don't know. So I kind of wanted to get rid of it just to kind of further have that characterization where he's not super familiar with the United States, but for that reason, he just says New York. This is Trevor and Asajala's first time meeting. I said they're apart for quite a while, so I kind of wanted to make it a more significant meeting instead of basically originally they kind of just met up and then they just start talking just like usual. So I wanted to add a few lines here. Basically, the last time they saw each other was on the prince's yacht where the Iranians tried to assassinate him. So I kind of decided that they should have a little bit of conversation here because this is their first time speaking since that incident, which was a very major incident, and they haven't seen each other in a while. So here I have this line here where, they talk a little bit and they kind of recap and they talk a little bit about what happened on the yacht because that's something they would naturally do. And also it's a way of just making sure, I guess, that their like interaction doesn't happen too abruptly. Like they don't just meet up and immediately just start talking business again. They haven't seen each other in a couple weeks. So, they kind of talk a little bit more here. They haven't seen each other in a while and something major has happened since the last time they spoke. So just kind of addressing that. For right here, Trevor is kind of confronting the prince about something bad that has happened in the country, I believe. And I kind of think Trevor was a little bit too forgiving in a way. Like, there's some real bad things happening and also some bad things happen elsewhere in the book. Just sort of like red flags showing up. And Trevor has kind of given the prince, second chances before. And I think if he gives him just more second chances, readers may kind of begin to think like, why isn't Trevor really asserting himself here? Why isn't he really letting this prince know that like enough is enough? There's been enough red flags here. We can't do business with you anymore. I think at this point, that's definitely something Trevor should be feeling and that I think readers should be expecting of him is that, the prince is kind of pushing himself here. There's been some problems in the country and these things have added up. So I decided to add these lines here where Trevor is really not just giving the prince a free pass. He is really more insistent here that, hey, there are some problems here and there's been problems for a while and, we can't really put up with this much anymore. So Trevor is just not really so easily giving the prince second chances. He's letting him know like, hey, we can't put up with this very much anymore. I mean, this may be the final straw here. So Trevor's just kind of being more forceful about that. So I think readers are just going to expect that of Trevor and all that. So I wanted to add it. A little bit later in the book, you find out Trevor is actually like staying at the palace, like the Saudi palace where the king stays, the like residence of the Saudi king. Trevor is kind of more or less just living there now. And so originally what I had here is Sajala kind of tells Trevor, like, because basically he was evicted from his hotel for a certain reason. And so Sajala is like, you know, don't worry, we're going to find you a different place to stay. And eventually they just let him stay at the palace, you find out. But I decided to add the line here, since that's what winds up happening, is Sajala basically says like, hey, we'll find you another place to stay. Maybe you'll even stay here at the palace. So he even kind of lets him know right then and there that, you know, maybe you can even stay here. Again, Trevor kind of letting Sajala know like, hey, enough is enough with this. You know, there has been too many bad things happen. We can't keep forgiving you for this. You know, this has to stop. We cannot keep, you know, tolerating this. Real small thing, just tightening it up. Or if he's a dictator, beginning to consolidate power. Or if he's a dictator, consolidating power. Just a way to, you know, tighten it up. Part 4, a bruised reed and a smoldering wick. Okay, earlier in the book, there has been several instances where Trevor has like confronted this prince, like with suggestions or whatever. Like one thing is a major issue has been like the death penalty in Saudi Arabia. And there's some other stuff as well, which you may see in this chapter. And so what I really wanted to do was just have those things mentioned here. So in this scene, Sajala is announcing several changes he is making to the law in Saudi Arabia. And so what he does is he mentions several things that have been previous points of contention between him and Trevor. So Trevor has previously talked to him quite at length about, like, you know, banning the death penalty for children, because at one part in the book, Saudi Arabia has like a mass execution of several children. And so Trevor, you know, at that time, he's like, you know, hey, that's not cool. You need to change that. And so in this scene here where Sajala is making several changes, that is one of the things he changes, where he says, you know, we are no longer going to have child executions in Saudi Arabia. And he makes several changes that Trevor was recommending to him. So that way, you know, all those previous storylines, like about the child executions and all that, they have closure here. The prince actually does something about it. So I just wanted to make sure I had those. Up at the top there, you know, I changed some of the, I don't know how to say it, like the names around, like Knight and he and all that, because there are, I think, 4 characters there in the scene and they're playing bridge together. And so there's just some confusion, like who does he refer to and all that. So just changing that, tightening it up a bit. And then something else I added for this draft is, so Trevor is in this scene with the Saudi king, the Saudi crown prince, and Sajala, who is right now just a prince. He is the son of the king. And so I wanted to add, like, whenever Trevor speaks to any of these guys, he will refer to them, either the king he refers to as your majesty. You see, originally I said your highness, but I think, you know, the actual term you'd refer to the Saudi king would be your majesty. And then the princes, you know, the crown prince, as well as any children or grandchildren of the king. I think the proper terminology in Saudi Arabia is your royal highness for both the crown prince and children and grandsons of the king. So in this scene, in this chapter, I basically, anytime Trevor tends to talk to any one of them, I think he says either to the king, your majesty, or to the princes, he'll say your royal highness. In other scenes, like when it's just Trevor and Sajala, he really doesn't refer to him that much by that, because these two have a friendship at this point. But in this scene, you know, Trevor hasn't really had many meetings with the king, and so Trevor is just being more formal here. So he is referring to the king as your majesty, and the prince, he, you know, refers to them by their proper titles. So it's just Trevor being more respectful toward, you know, their titles and all that. And kind of the importance of that is throughout the series, Trevor has really shown no intention of being really respectful. He has been pretty deliberately offensive, which, kind of a man after my own heart. But this is kind of the growth of his character. Trevor is really fond of Asajala here, the Saudi prince. And he is really kind of getting endeared to the Saudi royal family. So in this moment, he is really respectful. He uses their proper titles. He is doing everything he can to be respectful toward them. So I like it. It's just his maturation as a character. He is being more respectful. And this has kind of been a growing arc with Trevor. He has been kind of a problem throughout the series. He's been disrespectful. He's been like, what is he even trying to accomplish? Throughout the books, he's just caused problems. But now, finally, in the book Arabian Dawn, book 5, he's really beginning to mature as a person, and he's being more respectful. And in a way, this is the last place it should happen. He's in Saudi Arabia, which is basically everything that he opposes, like the manifestation or whatever of everything he opposes, like monarchy and Islam and radical Islam and everything. Everything he really dislikes about the region, like, their abuses of women's rights and all that, he sees it in Saudi Arabia. But he actually really kind of forms a friendship with Asajla, and he gains the king's respect and all that, and in turn he kind of respects them as well. So I just like it. It shows the development of his character. I was looking for other uses of this, but this is one I saw. So right here it says like this big moment in Egyptian history. So this is a character who is from Egypt. And I kind of tend to do this sometimes. Like, for instance, if I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, like if I have a general, for instance, or a admiral, for instance, of the Saudi Navy, I may have that character say something about like the Saudi Navy. And that'll be like their actual words, like the Saudi Navy. But if this character is a Saudi, he wouldn't say the Saudi Navy. He'd just say the Navy. Because to him, if he refers to the Navy, inherently he'd be referring to his own country's Navy. So he'd just say the Navy. For us, for Americans, like I don't say like the American president, whatever. I just say, Biden or whatever. I don't say the United States Navy, I say the Navy. So I kind of do that sometimes throughout my books in a way, because, I have so many different like countries and stuff, the Russian Navy and the Syrian Navy and the Iranian Navy and whatever, so I'm going through all these different countries and all that, all these different characters. But so sort of a change I'm trying to make is have characters refer less often to their own country, by mentioning their own country. So like Egyptian characters don't say Egyptian history. They just say history. Saudi characters don't say the Saudi Navy. They just say the Navy. So just kind of making that change. It's just kind of a flaw I've done in my writing. So just trying to get rid of it. Just kind of an inside joke, I guess. There's several parts in the book where Trevor says like, I hate sand or whatever. And what I was wanting him to do is kind of make fun of like the meme of, Star Wars where Anakin is like, whatever. His actual line is, I don't like sand, not I hate sand. So I had to change that. But basically I had this idea where, I have like 2 or 3 different parts where Trevor says, I don't like sand. But what I wanted him to do is each time he says it, he will say a different part of Anakin's line. So, I don't like sand. It's irritating. It gets everywhere. And I forget what's the other thing. It's irritating. It gets everywhere. Oh, it's coarse. So each time Trevor says something about sand, each time he will say a different part of Anakin's line. But he'll still say the I don't like sand part. So early in the book, he'll say like, I don't like sand. It's coarse. Then later in the book, he'll say, I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. Here he says, I don't like sand. It's irritating. So it's just sprinkled throughout the book where Trevor ultimately says each part of Anakin's line. I don't like sand. It's whatever. Just sort of a funny thing I throw in. Real small jokes. I'm not sure if anyone will pick up on them or not, but I like having it. Oh my goodness, look at all of that. Oh, so I'll actually kind of tell about what this is. So right here, Trevor is meeting with his father, who is a U.S. Senator from Ohio, and he's like maybe going to run for president soon. And so these two are kind of talking, and they're talking about Iran. and like Iran basically trying to acquire nuclear weapons. And so the senator here, I added a part where he says something like, look, Trevor, at one point the Soviet Union had 40,000 nuclear weapons. And, you know, that's just something we learn to live with. You know, we learn to live with the Soviets having nuclear weapons. And so what he does here is he says, you know, hey, you know, we'll probably have to learn to live with Iran having nuclear weapons too. And so Trevor responds like, you know, why mutually assured destruction does not work with Iran. Because with the Soviets, you know, the Soviets feared death, basically. You know, they didn't want to die. They knew if they launched their nukes against us, we'd launch our nukes against them and we'd all die. So because of it, there was no war. But what Trevor says here is mutually assured destruction does not work with Iran, because they have a culture or a religion where they believe if they die, you know, being martyred, they'll be rewarded with in heaven, you know, they'll be rewarded with an afterlife. So they are not concerned. Mutually assured destruction does not work against them. They do not care that if they launch missiles against you, you're going to launch missiles against them and everyone's going to die. They don't care. To them, they just think, well, so what? I'm going to go to heaven at least, so there's no reason for me not to do it. So it's just kind of having that conversation. And also the importance of it is this series is all leading toward a major invasion of Israel, which is going to happen in Book 7, Atlantis Dislodged, where every country in the region really is going to invade Israel, including Iran. And, you know, it's actually kind of going to go nuclear. So this is kind of setting that up. And it's sort of talking about just this threat, you know, with Iran and with Israel. And Israel, you know, they're kind of disliked throughout the region because everything is kind of leading toward Israel. And there's going to be a major war for Israel. Real small thing here, Sajla is contemplating, he's actually kind of made a decision to invade Qatar, the country Qatar. And so Trevor goes to speak with him. So he sits by him, and originally I just had the prince was quiet sitting by his piano. But I decided to add this line here where I basically say that Sajla is thinking about what he's going to say in his address declaring war on Qatar. So just to sort of let readers know more, I guess, what is going on here, instead of just Sajla sitting in front of the piano, you know, in his head, he's going through this speech, what he's going to say about declaring war on Qatar, because that's sort of what's going on here right now in this story and what Trevor is going to talk with him about. So it's just kind of a way of letting readers know more that, you know, Sajla here, you know, he's ready to declare war. War is imminent. So I just inserted that line to get that point across instead of just having a Sajla just quietly sitting there. The line there on the right side of the page, sort of top right of the page, I decided to move that over to the bottom left part of the page. The bottom left, you could see I circle a 1 there. So that just tells me that line up there on the right, move that down to that little circled 1 there. And the reason I do that is because there's kind of repetition here in both of these paragraphs. So, you know, there is a couple sentences or a sentence on the top right there that I could get rid of. And then the one sentence there I wanted to keep, I just moved that down to the bottom left of the page. So getting rid of repetition and also quickening the pacing. This is kind of a small but major detail in a way here, and it'll kind of come into importance later in another book as well. I think some senators from the United States are arriving in Saudi Arabia, and they roll out a purple carpet. And so Mora, this character who's kind of an expert on Saudi Arabia, she explains to Trevor how purple in Saudi Arabia is a color that is meant to like represent Saudi Arabia. So it represents like Saudi greatness and Saudi hospitality and all that. But she says how if they really respect someone, they roll out a red carpet, because a purple carpet honors Saudi Arabia, but a red carpet honors the actual guest. So what they're kind of talking about here is, you know, they rolled out a purple carpet for the senators. So it's kind of a subtle diplomatic jab where it's, you know, saying like, hey, this is our country, you know, you're in our country. And yeah, I don't know if I want to talk about it here, I guess, because I just like it so much. In book 7, Trevor's going to go to Saudi Arabia again. And this is kind of a spoiler, but they're going to roll out a red carpet for him. And it's actually going to bring him to tears because, he knows, because of this like line of dialogue here, he knows the importance of a red carpet. So when he goes back to Saudi Arabia in in Atlantis Dislodged, and they roll out a red carpet for him, showing that they respect him, it's gonna like completely bring him to tears, because I'm not gonna go through why, but yeah, and I just really like that from a character standpoint. So it's setting up that moment in Atlantis Dislodged when Trevor comes back to Saudi Arabia. And this is another change I'm actually going to make to the next draft of the book. I think I saw something somewhere about how like you're actually not supposed to touch like members of the Saudi royal family. And several times in the book, Trevor especially does touch the Saudi prince. And I think he also shakes hands with some other people as well. The Saudi prince does. So I think I want to change it in, the next drafts of the book, where I have it that way, where you're not supposed to touch the prince at all. But Trevor does throughout the book, touch the guy. And so it kind of will show their friendship, that Trevor is kind of the only one who is like brave or foolhardy or whatever enough to touch the prince, and that the prince doesn't mind that, basically Trevor is the only one who is really permitted or whatever to touch the prince. So it just shows their like unique relationship, that these two are really close. I mean, Trevor can like with impunity or whatever, shake the guy's hand, put his arm around him, give him a knock on the arm or whatever. These two are uniquely, they have a relationship with each other. So I think making that change where, the prince is not supposed to be touched, making that more of a plot point will make it more important, the fact that Trevor actually touches the guy and he's fine with it. And that will show more their character, that Trevor has a unique friendship with the prince. He is allowed to touch him. For this part here, I decided to change these lines because this part at the end here, director, the senator from Florida spoke, what about the girl? So this is a like Egyptian girl who is basically thought to have been like, captured or whatever. And so I thought the Ohio senator there at the top is Stephen Knight, Trevor's father. So I think it would be better in a way to give the line in, the above line to the Florida senator. I don't have a name for him in the book or the series at all. And give Stephen Knight, Trevor's father, give him the line where he is asking about the girl. Because I think that is more like, the emotional connection. So these senators, they're finding out about this news event, this girl being captured. And so instead of just having it be this random unnamed senator be the one asking about, hey, where's that girl? We're concerned about that girl. What's up with her? Give that line, that concern to Stephen Knight, just because that'll make him, I guess, more empathetic or whatever, make him more relatable. He is concerned about the life of that girl. So it makes more sense fundamentally from like a story or character perspective or whatever to give him that line. So I want to switch those around. For this line here, I realized I actually had a break in perspective. So the point of view for the start of the chapter is Trevor's father. So you see Trevor's father answering the phone, and it's from his perspective. But then at the end here, it actually reverted to Trevor, and you saw what Trevor is doing. So I decided to just make the change where the whole like scene or whatever is from Stephen Knight's perspective, Trevor's father. So I had to change the end of the scene here where it stays with Stephen Knight instead of going with Trevor. So the whole scene is from Stephen Knight's point of view. And a real small thing at the very bottom there, knowing she had only 4 shots left, I counted it out, and there were 4 shots she took. So originally it said 3, but she fired 4 bullets. So it's just a mistake, So she fired 4 shots in the book, so I had to change that. So she only has 4 shots left. So you see each one she fires. So yes, she does only have 4 shots left, not 3. just a mistake. For this line here, I wanted to add this line because basically these two women have this fight scene, and then what happens is they each get in cars and begin driving back to the capital. But I thought readers may be a little confused, like, are they still fighting or not? Because it says her path diverged from the assassins, so they begin going separate ways. So I thought readers may be a little confused, like, what? Are they chasing each other? Why did they just get in their cars and both go separate ways? So I decided to add the line here, like they had inflicted enough damage with each other, blah, blah, blah. So now they're in a race to get medical help before they die. But I did like that ending more, her path diverged from the assassins. So all I'm going to do is just move that line, her path diverged from the assassins, to the end of the chapter, because I just like it there, because I think it's a good end to the chapter. So that line, they had inflicted enough damage, whatever, that goes to the previous sentence. So yeah. Oh my goodness, and here is the afterword of the book, and I'm just kind of overtelling stuff, so I decided to just get rid of that whole page on the left, and then I also added some stuff on the right there, so just tidying up the afterword of the book. And this is actually the rest of the book, so that is it for the changes to Arabian Dawn. So just to show you guys the entire edits of the book, so what I have to do now is a pretty exhausting, tiresome process of making the changes into the computer. That can take some time, even if it's only like 5 corrections per page. It takes a while. It's frustrating, it's tiresome. Anyway, that is it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Bye.
2, 3, 4.